All right. Hey there, and welcome to the first episode of Sporadically Relevant. My name's Mackenzie Pauley, and I'm starting this podcast to basically talk about stuff that I suppose personally find interesting. A lot of stuff will be about sort of cultural events, current events, or historic events, usually revolving around politics or culture or just stuff that I think is of historical significance. So yeah, I think we'll just jump right into it. Obviously I'm going to have like multiple people either be talking to them or interviewing them or whatever. But I suppose for the first episode, I'll just do it myself since I think, one, just to get the ball rolling, and two, I think it's good so you guys get to sort of figure out who I am and where I'm coming from on certain topics. So yeah, I think we'll just go ahead and jump right into it. I guess the first thing really is both Paul Manafort and Michael Cohen, both were heavily involved with Donald Trump, whether it be his campaign or just his sort of business empire over the years. Yesterday were found guilty, Paul Manafort was found guilty and Michael Cohen pleaded guilty to sort of just a multitude of sort of multitude of felonies, whether it be campaign finance violations, all the way to sort of being a foreign political actor. Illegally. It's pretty wild when you really get to delve into it with Paul Manafort's ties to pro-Russian Ukrainian government officials, tax evasion, hiding money, and then Michael Cohen's own tax evasion problems and violating campaign finance law to pay off a porn star, Stormy Daniels, that Donald Trump had an affair with. In order to sort of prevent political blowback while he was a candidate. Now, I know that a lot of people might think that, hey, that's not a big deal, like, whatever, right? I think, the Bill Clinton era sort of maybe numbed many people to sort of sexual impropriety. And I'm not here to, like, judge on that. Like, you yourself can hold whatever belief you want to on whether or not the president should be held responsible for whether it be adulterous affairs or, I guess, lying about said adulterous affairs, which Trump has done, or whether or not lying about them in general is different than lying about them under oath. I mean, that's all on like the individual's sort of interpretation about what they view as right and wrong, and how, or just perhaps how legitimate they uphold various institutions, right? That lying about it to a reporter is in fact different than lying about it while under oath. I actually understand that argument, and I don't know if I completely buy into it, but if that's the route you're going to go, I think it's the route you have to go if you're going to condemn Bill Clinton and then sort of excuse Donald Trump. I think it's the only route to go that makes any logical sense, although I would probably disagree with it or push back on it a little bit. But if you're not even going that route, then I think you're completely up, biased alley, and you've entirely drank the Kool-Aid, and you're on the Trump train. But yeah, I think the biggest ramification for me personally is the fact that I don't actually believe this is going to have any sort of negative ramifications on Donald Trump. I don't think he's going to get impeached over this. I don't think this is the sort of like the fireworks everyone's been looking for. This is not the thing that's going to take down Donald Trump. It just won't. But what I do think matters most about this is that we have to ask ourselves as a society, as an American public, as the American people, have we finally gotten to the point where the presidency has been almost permanently sort of besmirched? Has it been permanently sort of scarred? And look, I don't mean that in a sort of, are you a Republican, are you a Democrat, are you left or you're right? I mean that in that Donald Trump does a multitude of things that I find to be distasteful. I find to be sort of not something that the President of the United States, arguably the most powerful man on planet Earth, the most powerful mammal in existence, should be doing. I mean, his sort of Twitter rants or his sort of vulgarity, his sort of a disregard for democratic norms, his horrendous behavior on the geopolitical scale. I mean, just look at Helsinki and you'll see that this is a real problem. He sort of seems to bow down to dictators, to foreign thugs. And that's a real problem because people voted him in as the tough man. People voted him in as the man that was going to make America strong again. I put that in quotes, strong again or great again. And yet, he seemed to do nothing but alienate our allies, our NATO allies, our long-standing Western allies, and yet bend over backwards to sort of excuse or legitimize foreign dictators that fall well outside how we view Western ideals or liberal democratic ideals. And I don't mean liberals in the conservative liberal debate that's in America. I mean, we're all liberals. We all believe in liberty and the spreading of democracy, the free market. These are things that are who we are as America. And I think Trump has undermined them in many ways. And I worry that we've gotten to a point now where even if Donald Trump doesn't do something that's irreversibly bad, well, you can say that, stacking the Supreme Court is irreversibly bad in our lifetimes. But what I mean is that if we managed to vote him out and he didn't do anything that any other Republican would have stacked the court in conservative favor. I mean, that's not something that's unique to Donald Trump. I don't think we should pretend that. But what I mean is if he's done something that is truly irreversible in the sense that he's completely dismantled our constitutional democratic republic, I don't think he's done anything like that quite yet, unless you were to argue this, which is that Donald Trump has somehow made the office of the presidency, the executive branch, into kind of either one, a cartoonish sort of freak show, reality TV show, which is ironic because he was a reality TV game show host before becoming president, which is something that, again, sours my mouth to say, but he was indeed a reality TV game show host. So let's say he's sort of made the executive branch, he's made the office of the presidency just kind of a reality TV sort of nonsenseville just sort of debacle. So you can argue that. So therefore, if we have another president, let's say that Donald Trump loses the election in 2020, which, again, if Democrats don't get it together and actually nominate someone who's of merit, then that's a legitimate possibility. All right, I don't want anyone to think that somehow Donald Trump doesn't win again in 2020. He has a legitimate following. He has a foundational support system. He's not a popular president, but he's definitely not an unpopular president. And I think Democrats or liberals or whoever need to understand that they can't just nominate Milk Toast in 2020 and win. And just like in the 2018 midterms coming up, you can't just nominate Milk Toast and win. But so getting back, before we get off topic, getting back to what I was talking about is that Donald Trump has essentially besmirched the executive branch to the point where if another president takes office in 2020 and they start doing something that I or you or whoever doesn't like, that the response can then always be, yeah, well, they're not as bad as Donald Trump. Which I actually think is a real problem, because being better than Donald Trump is not a bar that we should applaud someone for clearing. And there have been numerous problematic presidents in the past. I mean, and this is just, I mean this for anyone. I mean, some people would even consider, George W. Bush, or some people would even consider Bill Clinton to be a really issue-ridden presidency. I mean, even if you're on the left, you say, well, that crime bill was clearly a right-wing sort of appeasement of the law and order conservative movement that had been gaining traction since the 80s. I mean, since the election of Ronald Reagan, or even Richard Nixon. I mean, Richard Nixon ran on that, or Barry Goldwater for that matter, ran on the New Right platform. And then Richard Nixon sort of took and ran with. And that's where you get the law and order. You get the drug war launched, and how we view it today, launched in almost sort of its modern incarnation, which was then just sort of intensified by each incoming presidency. Even Jimmy Carter didn't do very much to sort of limit the war on drugs. And Bill Clinton did a lot to magnify it. And, that's the thing. He was a Democrat. Many liberals and those on the left will defend Bill Clinton. I even defend Bill Clinton. I like Bill Clinton. I think, would I vote for a Bill Clinton type Democrat today? Yes, but only in the general, and no, not in a primary, probably, ever. But I understand why Bill Clinton had to run the campaign he did, and had to sort of run the administration he did. I mean, Michael Dukakis's loss in 1988 was just sort of, it was a wake-up call for Democrats. I think that there were certain issues that you could not take anything but a right-wing stance on. And we'll even see a lot of those issues today. And again, there are some issues that I do take a right-wing stance on. The Second Amendment, I very much, in many people's view, would take a right-wing stance on. But again, we're getting very much down a rabbit hole that I don't know if I want to get all the way down. I want to save some of that for either later episodes or just later on in general. What I'm getting back to is that now that Donald Trump has become the president, there are many people that would, I think, no matter who the president is in 2020, 2024, 2028, etc., would say, yes, well, he is not as bad, or she is not as bad as Donald Trump, which may be very well true, but again, you're supposed to be able to criticize the president. I even say that to anyone, really, Democrat or Republican. You have to be able to criticize the president. It is fundamental to who we are as Americans. If you refuse to criticize the president or his or her administration, then you are absolutely sort of going against foundational American principles. Yeah, I don't understand quite where, let me take that back. I do understand where tribalism and the whole pick a team thing comes from, because again, I was raised heavily Democratic. My family were Southern Democrats. I would say this, I was raised a Democrat, but I wasn't raised liberal. And not that the Southern Democrats or Right of center Democrats, we'll just say today, I don't think there's really, you could find many right wing Democrats. I just don't think that very much exists anymore. But right of center Democrats are very much out there, or centrist Democrats, right? So the idea of a centrist in sort of the American context is, if you say I'm a centrist and you traditionally voted for either party, Republican or Democrat, in the past 40 years, then you're probably right of center. But typically means that many things that real left-wing individuals or sort of left-wing ideas have not been achieved. Think about it this way. Single-payer health care was implemented in the United Kingdom in 1946. So the year after World War II ended, England got a public option healthcare system. Whereas in 2018, we in the United States are still trying to achieve a healthcare system that works for all, that actually, gets people that need healthcare. But yeah, I don't have anything truly against Bill Clinton. I mean, there are some real issues with his presidency. Again, any presidency you can look at and go, well, that's not right, or that's wrong, or this, that, and the other. But my point is that any presidency, I think, has real issues. I mean, Bill Clinton repealed Glass-Steagall, which I do believe was a leading factor into the collapse of the banking system in 2007, basically the Great Recession in 2007, the collapse of the housing market. I think Bill Clinton's administration did, whether or not they did stuff to perpetuate that or to basically increase the likelihood of that happening, I mean, maybe you can argue against that, but you'd have to from a very right-wing perspective. I mean, he deregulated the banking system and increased the likelihood they were going to act in very risky they were going to indulge in very risky business practices. So yeah, I think Bill Clinton definitely should bear the weight of some of the responsibility of the Great Recession. So should Ronald Reagan and even George H.W. Bush and definitely George W. Bush. And every congressman and senator that served during those administrations. But I think the problem is that if Donald Trump becomes one of the most disliked presidents in history, if and that's a bold statement, but if somehow Donald Trump, there's sort of a consensus, right, among conservatives and liberals, those on the left and the right, that Donald Trump truly is, or was rather, because it's in the future, was a bad president, there will almost be an absolutely knee-jerk reaction on both sides to whenever any criticism of any president comes along to be, oh, well, he didn't do, Donald Trump did this and he didn't, well, this is not like what Donald Trump did, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm including Barack Obama in that. I mean, you should be able to criticize Obama's administration without being labeled a racist or a this or a that. And again, I like Barack Obama, but it's that we need to really avoid the tribalism and the almost hero worship that presidents oftentimes have. And, a lot of that's natural, right? As humans, we have a tendency to hero worship, to follow leaders, to we like hierarchical structures, we like hierarchical systems. But yeah, I think that, you can criticize Obama about definitely certain things. I don't think he did enough to combat Russia. In 2014, when Russia annexed the Ukraine, I think Obama dropped the ball very much so. I think that is a sign that Obama didn't want to escalate things, but because he didn't want to escalate things, he made America seem weak, which I think is a real issue. But likewise, I overall think Obama's presidency was a success. And my fear is that, let's say there's a president that you don't agree with, and as you criticize that president, someone then can just immediately undercut your criticism with, yes, well, Donald Trump, and then just sort of spout out the laundry list of issues that Donald Trump has. And I think of course it's a speculation, and hopefully that's incorrect. But I definitely think it's a very safe speculation, and I would be shocked if it ended up actually being incorrect. But yeah, I mean, things don't necessarily look good for Donald Trump. But I also don't think there really is anything there that can impeach him. I mean, that's a pipe dream. That's a far-fetched dream right there. The idea that we could impeach Donald Trump for doing this. So essentially, the problem is that Michael Cohen. And now the Paul Manafort stuff is a little more complicated, but the most cut and dry issue is that Michael Cohen paid off Stormy Daniels at the behest of Donald Trump in order to squash a story that would have a negative impact on him becoming the next president of the United States in 2016. Which, as we found out, or that people knew, and they were saying, hey, you can prosecute this, which indeed did happen. Michael Cohen he's looking at about 4 years. Now, he won't serve all that, I'm sure. But the thing is, you can't indict a sitting president, which is kind of a problem. I think that's definitely something we need to address. But anyway, perhaps some people are saying that perhaps it's enough to impeach Donald Trump that he ordered Michael Cohen to break campaign finance law. But I doubt it. I doubt it. I think Donald Trump's financial ties to Russian oligarchs is enough to, in a logical world, in a morally logical world, should be enough to disqualify him from ever becoming president. But as we can see and as we know, this is not true. No one really seems to care if Donald Trump has just numerous business ties with Russian oligarchs, which we know work for Vladimir Putin, which is the dictator of Russia, who has political opponents murdered, who has journalists killed that he disagrees with, and otherwise rules Russia with an iron fist and is antithetical to everything that we should believe as Americans. But again, in my opinion, Donald Trump's ties to all that should have been enough to disqualify him, but it clearly wasn't. Yeah, so I don't actually think that any of this will be enough to take Trump down. I just don't. Even if there's a blue wave in 2018 come November and there's numerous Democrats elected, I don't actually see a coalition of Democrats managing to successfully impeach Donald Trump and then after impeachment then remove him from office. I just don't really see that happening, just because I don't. Again, in order to impeach a president, yes, there has to be a sort of legitimate precedent there. There has to be a cause and a reason that is legitimate. But there also has to be support from the American people. And again, Donald Trump, whether or not you want to admit it or not, has a significant support. He has a significant support amongst his base. I mean, he does not fall below 40%. He just doesn't. And no matter how you twist the polls or whatever, he just does not fall, as of right now, below 40%. In fact, gets well above that in most every poll. I mean, now he has a cap. Obviously, he has a sort of a cap where you can't really push in above that, but there seems to be no real way he falls below it either. Which, again, people seem to be in denial about. People seem to really be in denial that somehow this president, whom they hate so much, has supporters. He absolutely has supporters. And now, again, later on, we'll get into why that is. We'll get into why they support Donald Trump, whether it, be economic anxiety, income inequality, xenophobia, changing demographic anxiety. I mean, there's a lot of stuff we can discuss about why Donald Trump was elected. Hillary Clinton being establishment, a neoliberal that no one really liked, etc., etc. The sort of desire for populism, and a fake populist will always defeat an establishment candidate kind of idea. But I definitely think that people need to realize that Donald Trump has supporters, and unless you engage in a dialogue and unless you talk to people, you will absolutely alienate them from ever voting the way you want them to vote. Now, I'm not saying you sort of bend over backwards to get racist people to vote for you or something like that. But I mean, there are people that voted for Donald Trump that I do think, and perhaps I am sort of past examples of my public sort of like speaking or persona, I have not addressed that in the right way. But I do think there are individuals who you can reach and absolutely voted for Donald Trump that aren't evil people or bad people, etc., etc. And even I fall into the trap of trying to paint people that disagree with me politically as this or a that. And sometimes people are a this or a that. Sometimes people are really the things people say. I have met legitimate racists in my life. I'm a white male in the South. Even many of my friends share problematic ideas and views. I myself, when I was young, I remember hearing family members say things that now would just be socially unacceptable. And it's good that they're socially unacceptable. And I myself have evolved. That's who we are as people. That's what we should be doing. But I do think there are people out there that just really wanted to throw a brick through a window. And Donald Trump was that. And everyone knows this. This has been discussed numerous times on numerous other places. But what I think is most interesting now is that if we do get to a point because of the Michael Cohen and the Paul Manafort convictions and the guilty pleas, that if somehow the majority of Americans, kind of like a Nixon thing, agree. Nixon was a very popular president, by the way. It's not like people can't turn on those who they voted for. Now, social media, right, might have hurt that, but it's still possible, absolutely. But again, I think the real fear is that if we get to a point where somehow we think as long as a president or a political leader is better than Donald Trump, then they're fine, or that they don't deserve condemnation or criticism, then that's going to be a real problem. That's going to be an absolute real problem. But yeah, hopefully I'm wrong about that, or that I'm incorrect on the severity of it. But I definitely think it's going to be an issue moving forward. But yeah, that's kind of all I wanted to talk about. It's been about half an hour. Just kind of a quick introduction to who I am and kind of what I want Sporadically Relevant to be about. Again, I want to talk about movies and video games and culture and sort of just society in general. But yeah, I think one of the most important things right now is politics. And I know a lot of people like, oh gosh, politics, I just want to escape. And I understand that. I understand wanting to escape politics. But also, if you're not politically literate, then you're not being sort of a beneficial or productive member of society. And that might be kind of a hot take or a controversial thing to say, but I do think it's true. If you don't vote or you don't contribute in some way to our society, then you absolutely should have all the rights that our society provides, that our nation provides. But I definitely think you are sort of reaping all the benefits without giving anything back, and I think that's a real issue. So I think that I'm not going to shy away from talking about politics. Next time, I really want to talk about history, some of the things that, like, because I am a history major, and some of the things that really intrigue me and I think that relate to our current situation, and just anything really that's going on that's culturally relevant. But yeah, so thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you guys next time.